What's up, guys? Welcome back to my channel. Before I say anything, I would like to say a very big thank you to everyone who has supported this channel right from when I started. Thank you so much for the likes, for the shares, for those that also take out the extra time to comment, and to everybody who has subscribed to this channel right from when I started. You guys are the motivation behind what I do here, and I am really grateful. Thank you so much. If you're new here, my name is Ayomide. I post DIY sewing tutorials on this channel. I am a Nigerian and I am based in Nigeria. I went to a fashion school right here in Nigeria, so all that I know about fashion, I was taught here in Nigeria. And because I like to share knowledge, I decided to create this YouTube channel to share how I sew my clothes. So on this channel, you're going to find DIY sewing tutorials. In this tutorial, I'm going to be sharing with you guys how I draft my Princess Dart Bustier blouse. This is a style that most people have an issue with, especially achieving a well-defined bust area. So I'm going to be sharing with you guys how I draft my Princess Dart blouse in order to achieve a well-defined bust area. And if you want to learn that, then you should see this video till the end. This video has the pattern drafting, the cutting, and the sewing. It is a well-detailed tutorial. Before we go ahead, if you haven't subscribed to my channel, now is the time to subscribe, and you could also click on the notification bell below so you can become notified whenever I upload a new video. Now let us move ahead.
Okay guys, to get started, I have gone ahead to write out the measurement we are going to be working with, and we are needing the shoulder to bust, shoulder to under bust, shoulder to waist for both the front and the back. Remember, they are not equal. And we also need your bust measurement, under bust, waist measurement, and the chest line measurement. And the chest line can be calculated. It is your bust divided by 6 plus 1.5, and in my case I have 7.3 inches. And to move ahead, I have gone ahead to mark out my lines. At the topmost part here, I have my shoulder line. I'm just going ahead to indicate that is my shoulder. I have my bust point line, my under bust, and my waist line. Alright guys, the first thing I will do is to draw in my chest line, and I will be taking that measurement right from my shoulder slant. So I'm just going in to mark 7.3 inches across, and then once I'm done taking that measurement across, I would go ahead and connect it with my pattern master, and I would indicate that is my chest line. The next thing I will do is to mark half of my nipple to nipple measurement on the waistline, which is just the distance between one nipple to another, and in my case it is 8 divided by 2 is 4 inches, and from that 4 inches I'm going to be taking half inch on both sides for my dart. I want my dart to be a total of 1 inch, and then on my bust point line I'll go ahead and mark that same 4 inches. I'll just go ahead and mark the point right there, and from that point I'm going to be coming down by 1 inch, because ideally your dart is not supposed to get to your bust point. So once I'm through with that, I'll go ahead and connect. The next thing I will do is to square down my shoulder measurement. So in order to have a perfect straight line, I will just measure what I have on my shoulder slant, which is 7.5, and I will be placing that same measurement on my chest line. I will just mark the point right on my chest line, and then using my pattern master I would draw in a straight line. Afterwards, on my chest line I'm going to be placing a quarter of the bust measurement I'm working with, which is 8.75. 35 divided by 4 is 8.75, and on the waistline I'm going to be placing a quarter of the waist measurement I'm working with plus 1 inch dart allowance. Always remember to include your dart allowance. That gives me a total of 8 inches. So on the waistline I'm going ahead to place 8 inches, and once I'm through with that, I'll connect it together with my pattern master. Thereafter, on my underbust measurements, to carry out my underbust tightening, I would mark a quarter of my underbust measurement this way, which is 7.5, and then mark out what I have left on my bodice, which is about 1 inch. I'm going to be dividing that value by 2 to give me 0.5. So from this dart leg, I would mark away 0.5, and from the other dart leg too, I would also mark out 0.5. This is a very good way to carry out your underbust tightening. Even if yours is 1.5 or 2 inches you have left, just divide whatever you have by 2 and then mark out your value just like I am doing. So as I'm done, I will go ahead and then connect all of those points together. So guys, the next thing I'm going to be doing is to draw in my armhole. And to draw in your armhole, all I have to do is to get the midpoint of my chest line. So in order for me to get that midpoint, I will just fold over my tape. This is a very cheap way to get your midpoint instead of using a calculator. Then from there, I'm going to be coming inwards by 0.75. and I would connect the point to my bust measurement on the chest line. Once I'm through with that, I would measure my armhole roughly. I'm measuring it this way so that I can determine the midpoint. So I have about 8.5, and to get the midpoint, it should be about 4.25 thereabouts. So I'm just folding over my tape, and then I'm going to be placing the midpoint just on my armhole this way, and from that point I'm going to be taking ½ inch away on both sides for my dart. I'm also using 1 inch for my dart along the armhole, and I will connect that midpoint to my bust point line. Once I'm done connecting to my bust point line, the next thing I will do is to come up by 1 inch from that bust point line. Remember, your dart is not supposed to get to your bust point, and then connect those ½ inch measurement we took away. I'm going to be connecting it up until that point, but I'm going to be extending this line this way. This is for a reason, I would explain it later. So I extended this line because we have a dart along this region, and I'm going to be taking off this dart, and when I take off this dart, I'm going to be losing some measurement, and whenever you're taking out some measurement, you need to compensate for it. And I have a total of 1 inch there, so I would go over on that line I extended and mark out the exact measurement I will be losing, and I'll connect my armhole, meaning I'm going to be redrawing my armhole back to my bust measurement. I'm going to show us the implication of not doing this, what the outcome of your dress or your style would be if you forget to carry out this extension. It is very, very important. So this is going to be my new armhole, and I'm going ahead to put a cross over there so as not to get confused when I'm cutting out this pattern. This is going to be the new armhole. To move further ahead, I'm going to be drawing in my bust dart, and to draw in my bust dart, I need the difference between my shoulder to waist for the front and the back. So taking out 15 from 16, I have 1 inch left. From my bust point over there, I'm going to be marking that exact measurement, the exact difference. So I'm going to be marking 1 inch downwards this way, and then from my bust point there, I'm also going to be marking 1 inch away because your dart should not get to your bust, and I would go ahead and connect the points together. The next thing I will do is to remodify my shoulder slant, and I want my shoulder slant to be 3.5 inches wide. So I'm going ahead to measure out 3.5 inches, and I want my neckline. I want a V neckline and I want it to be 5.5 inches deep. So right from the center front, I'm just going ahead to mark 5.5 inches and I'm going to be connecting it to the 3.5 inches that I marked. I like to draw my V neckline this way. I like it when it is a little bit curvy. The next thing I'm doing, guys, is to transfer my bust dart to the waist, and in order to transfer the bust dart to the waist, you would have to slash open that line that runs through that 4 inches. So I'm just going ahead to slash it open up until my bust point line, and when I get there, I'm also going to be slashing it that line that stops just before my bust dart. This allows room for more fullness and allows you to close your dart properly. And in order to be able to transfer a dart around your borders, you will need to slash open the region whereby you want to transfer the dart to. So that is why I'm slashing open my waist, because I am transferring the bust dart to the waist. In order to do that, I would grab one end of my bust dart and make sure it aligns with my bust line, since that is where the dart is starting from. So I'm just grabbing one end of my dart, making sure it aligns with my bust line. Afterwards, I would go ahead and secure it with a tape. And if you look at it this way, the waistline opened up, which means I have transferred the bust dart to the waist. The next thing I'll do is to smoothen the edges. You might notice that the edges may not align, the side may not align. There's no need to worry. All you have to do is just to smoothen out the edges. So guys, what we have to do, or what I did next, is to cut out my pattern, and this is all for the front. This is how I draft my Princess Dart Bustier pattern for the front. Once I'm done cutting out the pattern for the front, would go ahead to the back. I'm done cutting my pattern for the front, and I'm going ahead to indicate this is my panel 1 and it is my center front, and that region is to be cut on fold, and this is my second panel, which is my side front. Remember, these panels don't have seam allowances, which means I'm going to be adding seam allowance on my fabric. Now, I said I was going to be showing us the consequences of not doing the extension, but because I did the extension, my armhole properly aligned. But if I did not do the extension, I'm going to be having something like this. Remember, that region is our old armhole, so I'm going to be short of fabric. My chest line is aligning, but the armhole is not aligning, which is a very big error. So if you don't do the extension, you're going to be having something like this. But if you do that extension, you're going to having a perfectly fit armhole. So guys, whenever you're taking your darts along your armhole or wherever, make sure you compensate, make sure you add it back, make sure you add back your measurements, because if you don't do it, you're going to be short of measurements along the way, and that may ruin the style you're working with entirely. Alright guys, we're done with the front, and the next thing is to proceed to the back. Moving on to the back, I have gone ahead to mark out my lines. I have my zipper allowance along this region. I'm just going ahead to indicate, and I have my chest line and my waistline, and my shoulder to waist for the back is 15 inches, remember. Also, I have half inch for dart allowance on both sides, which is a total of 1 inch, so my dart allowance is 1 inch. On my chest line, I'm going to be placing a quarter of my bust measurements, which is 8.75. On the waistline, I'm going to be placing a quarter of the waist measurements plus 1 inch dart allowance, which is a total of 8 inches. And once I'm through with that, I'll go ahead and connect the points together. The next thing I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be altering my shoulder slant. Remember, the front was 3.5 and the back would also be 3.5. And for the neckline, I want a round neckline, but I want it to be 4.5 inches deep. Right from my center back, I am marking 4.5 inches, and I'm using my pattern master to create my neckline. The next thing I will do is to get the midpoint of my shoulder slant in order to create my dart. I'll get the midpoint right there and then connect it to that measurement on my chest line. This is because I want to have two panels for the back. I want to have two separate panels for the back. This is totally optional. You could leave your back as a single block, or you could divide it into two separate panels. In order to get rid of zip bulge at the back of the blouse, I would go ahead and mark ½ inch away from the zipper allowance. This works for me perfectly all the time. So that ½ inch I marked away, I'm going to be replacing it back on the other side of my pattern. This is to ensure that my measurements would align when I'm sewing, and the next thing I will do is to reconnect my lines again. So I am reconnecting my bust measurements back to the ½ inch I took away, and from my back neckline I'm going to be redrawing my zipper allowance. So guys, this part I'm marking, I'm going to be taking it off entirely. I don't need it. So guys, I actually almost forgot to draw in my armhole. So to draw in my armhole, just like I did for the front, I'm going to be getting the midpoint of the chest line by folding my tape into two, which is a trick, and thereafter I'm going to be coming inwards by 0.5, and I'm going to be connecting right from my shoulder slant up onto my bust measurement on the chest line. The next thing I will do is to cut out my pattern. So we are done for the back. The back is quite easy and simple to draft. Once I'm done cutting out, I would go ahead and indicate that this is my center back and this is my side back. I'm also going ahead to indicate I'm supposed to cut two pieces of each one of these panels, and the next thing I'll do is to also indicate that I'm supposed to add seam allowance. This is just the way I like to indicate on my pattern, and it works perfectly for me. So I'm going ahead to include those arrows to the regions where I'm supposed to add my seam allowance to. So guys, this is all for how to draft a Princess Dart Bustier pattern for both the front and the back. I'm repeating the same thing for my front panel too, and once I'm done indicating I'm supposed to add seam allowance, we are going to be proceeding to the cutting of this pattern. To cut the pattern, these are the fabrics I'm going to be using. I have my pattern for sure, I have my pins and my very much gigantic scissors. This scissors is quite gigantic. Then for the main fabric, I'm going to be using this lovely Adire fabric, locally made in Nigeria, Ogun State, Abeokuta. I love the fact that it has borders along the edges, so I'm going to be putting those borders along the neckline of my blouse, and I'm also using the cotton lining. So I'm starting with the back, and I'm just going ahead to pin my back panels on my lining, and once I'm done pinning, I'll go ahead and mark out my seam allowances on my fabric. And once I'm done marking out the seam allowances, the next thing I will do is to cut out my lining pieces. So I did the same procedure for both the front and the back on both my lining and on my fabric pieces. Okay guys, I'm done cutting out, and I've gone ahead to fill in my wording on my front panel pieces on both the center front and the side front, and these are my back panel pieces. The next thing I did, I also have my lining here actually. The next thing I did is that to join my front panel pieces together, I'm going to be placing right sides against right sides, and I'm going to be sewing in by ½ inch seam allowance right from the waistline up onto the armhole region. I did this for both sides of my panels. So I'm on my sewing machine right now, and then I'm placing the right side of my center front, of my side front rather, on the right side of my center front. and once I'm placed them equally together, I'm going to be sewing it in by my half-inch seam allowance. Sewing a princess seam can actually get tricky at times, so if you know you cannot properly handle a curved region, I would advise you pin your panel pieces together first. This is what I used to do initially, but over time I got a hold of it. But if you know you cannot handle it, just go ahead and pin in order to save yourself some undue stress, and you can now sew. Okay guys, I'm done stitching the both sides of my side front to my center front, and this is the outcome of the front panel. Even without ironing, the bust area is already coming out well pronounced. So this is the outcome of the front panel. You can see the way the bust area is well defined. I love this fabric actually. I love the flowery pattern and the design along the neckline. So guys, this is the outcome, and this is it on the inside. I would go ahead and proceed to sew in my back panels together and also sew in my lining panel pieces together. Once I'm done stitching all of my pieces together, the next thing I'm doing is to iron in my front panel and my back panel. And for my front panel, I use a tailor's arm to iron along the princess seam. This allows your seam to come out well. It allows you to iron with ease. Remember that region is a curvy region, so you don't have to struggle with it, and also you're able to open up your seam lines properly. It allows your seam lines to lay nice and flat. Okay guys, I'm done ironing and this is the outcome. This is what I have. The next thing I'm doing is I'm going to be notching right under my bust region, and this is to allow the under bust region to lay properly. It allows it to even be much more pronounced, so it allows you to be much more prominent. The next thing I will do right now is to turn my neckline. Now to turn your neckline, there are so many ways, there are so many methods. The one I'm using now is just one of the methods. You can decide to have all of your seam lines concealed, or you can decide to do it just the way I'm doing. What I'm doing is that I'm going to be placing right sides of my lining against the right sides of my fabric, and I'm going to be sewing it along the neckline. I would go ahead and sew it along the neckline and along the sides, but I'm not going to be sewing it along the armhole. This is for the front. I'm just going ahead to pin it along the neckline. Also for the back, I would place right sides of my lining against the right sides of my fabric. I will sew it in along the neckline, sew it in along the side, and also sew it in along the zipper allowance, but I'm not going to be sewing it in along the armhole. This is the outcome. I'm done sewing it in. This is what I have for the front. You can see how it looks nice and clean, and this is what I have on the inside and on the outside. And in order to close up my shoulder slope, what I will do is to place the right side of my back that matches with my front, place it together and open it up along the shoulder slope or the shoulder slant. in such a way that lining faces lining and fabric faces fabric. So I'll go ahead and pin it down this way, and I'm going to be sewing it in by my 1/2 inch seam allowance. Sewing it this way ensures that your seam lines along the shoulder slope is concealed, it's not revealed, you don't see it, and it makes your work nice and flat. So guys, I've gone ahead to sew it in along the shoulder slope, and this is what I have on the inside. You can see how neat and clean it looks, and when I open it up, I have my seam lines on the inside, but it is properly concealed. So in order to join my pieces together along the sides, I'm going to be placing right sides against right sides again, and then I'm going to be sewing it in by my 1 inch or 1.5 inch seam allowance. I will just take my measurements and sew. And okay guys, this is the outcome of the blouse. You can see how beautiful it came out. This is really beautiful. I loved the outcome already. So guys, this is how I draft my Princess Dart Bustier pattern. If you have learned something new from this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please go ahead and click on the subscription button below. And until my next video guys, have a great day.